Okay, strap yourselves in for this one, folks. This deep dive is going to take us all the way to Singapore, and let's just say the story we're covering is pretty hard to believe, but it's been making headlines worldwide, so.
Buckle up,
Yeah.
for sure.
So imagine just for a second, you find out that your husband has been drugging you for years.
Okay.
Oh, yeah, there, well, it gets much darker. We've got a ton of sources lined up for you guys. A Rotten Mango deep dive on YouTube. We've got forum posts, news articles.
Oh, wow.
Whole words. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're going to be like exploring some really disturbing stuff, like
The dark underbelly of online forums.
controversial legal punishments and honestly just betrayal that would like shake you to your core. So to start, let's talk about James and Jennifer.
Yeah.
On the surface, they seem like a pretty normal couple. 4 daughters, the usual struggles of being parents. A desire to kind of rekindle that spark in their marriage. James even booked them a trip to the Marina Bay Sands Hotel, you know, one with that incredible infinity pool.
Oh, yeah.
Overlooking the city. It seemed like he wanted to like pamper Jennifer. At least that's how it looked.
Well, the interesting thing here is that James's motivation for the trip wasn't totally pure, you know. It might have seemed like this romantic gesture on the surface, but he was actually having some serious doubts about Jennifer being faithful. I think he saw this lavish trip as a chance to like sneak a peek at her phone and like confirm his suspicions.
Ah, so he was already suspicious. And he snooped, huh?
Oh yeah, he definitely snooped.
While Jennifer's enjoying this like incredible hotel, James is going through her phone. And he found messages between Jennifer and his friend Owen.
Oh no.
And not only did the messages point to an affair, but they also revealed like Jennifer's feelings of being unhappy in the marriage. She even admitted to fantasizing about Owen during intimate moments with James.
That's brutal.
He's rough.
So you can imagine how devastated James must have felt.
Yeah.
And instead of talking to Jennifer directly or seeking some kind of professional help to work through their issues, he turned to the internet for advice. Specifically, a popular Singaporean online forum called Sammy Boy.
Sammy Boy. Okay, I've heard of Sammy Boy. It's a bit of a mixed bag, right? It's got those forums where people just discuss everyday things like news, hobbies, even coffee. Kind of like a less moderated Reddit, I guess.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. But then there's this whole other section called the Asian Values Forum, and that's where things get a bit dicey.
Okay.
It's known for hosting some pretty explicit content, even illegal stuff, like hidden camera footage. It's like this corner of the internet where anything goes, with very little oversight or moderation.
Wow, so like a total free-for-all.
Pretty much.
And that lack of moderation, it seems like, that's what really created this environment.
Yeah.
For James's paranoia and his need for revenge to just grow and grow.
Exactly. Instead of finding support and guidance on how to actually fix his marriage, he stumbled into this online space where his anger and resentment were basically validated and amplified.
So James is feeling completely betrayed, and he's desperately seeking validation for his feelings. He starts posting on Sammy Boy's marriage forums, right? Looking for advice. But what he found there wasn't exactly the supportive community he might have been hoping for.
Yeah, the advice he got, it was shockingly misogynistic. Instead of encouraging open communication or therapy, you know, these forum members just piled on, fueling James's rage and pushing him down this really dark path of vengeance.
It's scary how online spaces can do that sometimes. Just echo chamber, amplifying the worst in people.
Absolutely.
So what kind of advice was he actually getting?
Well, basically, they were validating his paranoia and encouraging him to take really extreme measures. And that's when James came up with this twisted plan for a honey trap.
A honey trap? Wait, not like a typical online honey trap.
No. This wasn't about testing Jennifer's loyalty online. This was something far more sinister.
Okay, so what was he thinking?
James wanted his friend to actually sleep with his wife.
What?
And he was going to make it happen.
That's, I mean, that's just a whole other level of messed up.
Yeah, it takes a really dark turn here.
So how did this plan even play out?
Well, picture this. It's James and Jennifer's 3rd wedding anniversary. They're at home celebrating, seemingly happy, sharing a bottle of wine. James pours Jennifer a glass. They toast, reminisce, you know. But unbeknownst to Jennifer, her husband has crushed sleeping pills into her drink.
Oh, my God.
The drug was Dormicum, a really powerful sedative that's known for its quick action and amnesiac effects.
So she wouldn't even remember what happened.
Exactly. And to make matters worse, he mixed it with alcohol,
Oh.
which is incredibly dangerous. It can lead to respiratory depression, brain damage, even death.
It's terrifying to think he would do that to his own wife.
It really is.
So as Jennifer starts to feel drowsy, not knowing the danger she's in, James puts his plan into motion. He texts Owen, the friend who's involved in this whole twisted scheme, and he waits for him to arrive. And then, with this mix of guilt and excitement, James watches as Owen assaults his unconscious wife in their own bed.
This is a horrific violation on so many levels. It's a betrayal of trust, an invasion of Jennifer's body, and a complete disregard for her humanity. The fact that it happened in their marital home, a place where she should feel safe, just adds another layer of cruelty to this act.
It's unimaginable. And I can't believe it gets even worse.
Oh, it does. What happened next is even more shocking.
What could be worse than that?
You would think, after witnessing such a horrible act, James would be filled with guilt and remorse, right?
I'd think.
But instead, he did something even more baffling. He went back to Sammy Boy. Not to the marriage forums this time, but to the Asian Values Forum.
The one we talked about.
Yeah. And he started bragging about what he had done.
No way.
Yeah.
He was boasting about assaulting his wife.
He was.
This is insane.
James's decision to share his actions on that forum, it's chilling. It reveals a total lack of remorse and a disturbing willingness to normalize his criminal behavior. That forum, with its lack of moderation and tolerance for explicit content, it becomes this dangerous echo chamber for James's twisted justifications.
That's what's so scary about these unmoderated spaces online. They can really warp people's sense of reality.
Absolutely.
And create these communities that encourage and enable harmful behavior.
Exactly.
So what happened after James shared his story?
Well, that's where things take an even darker turn. His post on the Asian Values Forum attracted the attention of other men lurking in that dark corner of the internet. Men like Matt and Kevin, who were not only intrigued by James's story, but actually expressed a desire to participate in this horrific game.
It's just mind-blowing how quickly this escalated.
Yeah.
From one man's twisted revenge fantasy to this group of men enabling and encouraging each other's depravity.
It's really alarming how the anonymity of the forum and the lack of consequences for their words created this dangerous environment where these men felt emboldened to push the boundaries of morality and legality.
And the language they used is just chilling. They started referring to the women as objects, prizes to be exchanged and gifted. It's clear they had lost any sense of empathy or respect for the women involved.
That dehumanizing language, it's a classic hallmark of predatory behavior. It allows them to distance themselves from the reality of their actions and the harm they're inflicting. It's a way to justify their behavior in their own minds and avoid confronting the ethical and moral implications of their choices.
And I can't believe it, but it gets even worse.
Oh, it does.
Tell me it doesn't.
It does.
Okay, go on.
James, fueled by the attention and validation he's getting online, he becomes even bolder. He not only continues to drug and orchestrate the assault of his own wife, but he also demands to assault Matt's ex-wife, Mary.
Oh my God.
This escalation is a clear sign of a pattern of predatory behavior. He's no longer solely focused on revenge against Jennifer. He's seeking out new victims and expanding his circle of exploitation. It's a disturbing reminder that abusers often escalate their behavior over time, pushing the boundaries further and further.
So it went from his wife to his friend's ex-wife.
Ew, I don't even know what to say. And they even started live streaming these assaults on Sammy Boy for a select audience, of course, protected by a password, but still. The level of premeditation and the deliberate humiliation they inflicted on these women is just staggering.
Live streaming it. Really?
The live streaming adds another layer of cruelty and exploitation to this already horrific situation. It transforms these assaults into a form of entertainment for this select group of individuals who share and revel in this perverse ideology.
It makes you wonder, what's going on in the minds of people who would watch something like that?
It's a dark question.
Yeah.
But an important one to consider.
This case really highlights the dangers of unmoderated online spaces and how they can be exploited for criminal purposes.
Absolutely.
It's a sobering thought.
It is.
And as we delve deeper into this disturbing case, it's important to make a clear distinction between what James and these men are doing and consensual practices like cuckolding or wife sharing.
You're absolutely right. Those are two very different things. While there are complex psychological and interpersonal dynamics at play in consensual, non-monogamous relationships, what we're seeing here is a clear case of abuse and exploitation. There's no consent. There's coercion. And there's a deliberate intent to inflict harm.
I think that Reddit comment we mentioned earlier really captures it perfectly. This is about possessiveness. It's not about being a husband. It's about being an owner.
That's a powerful statement.
It's chilling how accurately that sums up the mindset of these men.
It really does.
No.
James's actions are not about exploring alternative sexual dynamics or engaging in consensual non-monogamy. They're about control, domination, and the objectification of women.
So how did this all come crashing down?
Well, Jennifer, who was completely unaware of the horror she had been subjected to, stumbles upon the truth. One day, while James is asleep, she finds his phone unattended, and curiosity gets the better of her.
I can't imagine what she must have been feeling.
This discovery is a pivotal moment in the story. It's the turning point where Jennifer, who has been so brutally victimized and betrayed, takes control of the situation and seeks justice.
It's hard to believe she would even have the strength to do that.
It's a testament to her resilience that even in the face of unimaginable trauma, she found the strength to fight back.
So she finds his phone, and what does she see?
What she finds is absolutely horrifying. Chat logs detailing the assaults, photos of herself naked and unconscious being violated by multiple men. Imagine the shock, the betrayal, the sheer horror of discovering that your husband, the person you shared your life with, has been drugging and exploiting you for years.
I don't even have words.
It's almost impossible to comprehend the level of trauma Jennifer experienced in that moment. Not only was she confronted with the reality of the assaults, but she also had to grapple with the realization that these acts were orchestrated by her own husband, the person she trusted most in the world.
So what did she do?
Understandably, she confronts James, demanding answers, and the truth comes pouring out, exposing years of deceit, manipulation, and horrific abuse.
That must have been such a difficult confrontation.
It was a critical moment for Jennifer. She takes back her power, confronts her abuser, and refuses to be silenced.
It's inspiring to hear that.
Her courage in facing James and seeking justice is remarkable.
So what happened to James and the other men involved?
That brings us to the legal system in Singapore. These men, caught in their web of deceit and depravity, soon find themselves facing the full force of the law, including a controversial punishment known as caning.
Caning, I've heard of that, but don't know much about it.
Caning in Singapore is a highly debated form of punishment. It's used for a range of offenses, from vandalism to drug trafficking, and it involves being whipped with a rattan cane.
That sounds incredibly brutal.
It is a severe punishment. Proponents argue that it's an effective deterrent and that it has contributed to Singapore's remarkably low crime rates, while critics denounce it as cruel and inhumane.
So it was a very polarizing issue.
Very much so.
I feel like caning is a topic worthy of its own deep dive.
It definitely is.
But for now, it's important to understand the gravity of this punishment. It's not just a slap on the wrist. It's a brutal and physically painful experience.
And the psychological impact is significant as well. The anticipation, the fear, the public humiliation all contribute to the severity of the punishment.
Wow. So this is serious stuff.
It is.
So back to the case at hand. What were the sentences for these men?
The men involved received varying sentences, some including caning. But what stood out to me, perhaps even more than the punishments themselves, was their complete lack of remorse and their attempts to shift the blame onto their victims.
It's just unbelievable.
It's a common tactic among abusers. They minimize their actions, deflect responsibility, and try to portray themselves as victims to avoid accountability and maintain a sense of control.
So how did they try to spin this?
Well, James, for example, chose to represent himself in court. Yeah, it seemed like a strange decision at first, but it quickly became clear that he was determined to control the narrative and play the victim.
How so?
He admitted to drugging and facilitating the assaults, but he tried to justify his actions by claiming that he was just trying to be a good friend, reciprocating favors.
Reciprocating favors
Yeah.
by drugging and assaulting his wife.
That was his argument.
That's ludicrous.
It's a classic example of gaslighting and manipulation. He's trying to distort reality, downplay the severity of his crimes, and make it seem like he was somehow forced or coerced into participating.
trying to make himself the victim.
Exactly.
So the judge didn't buy it, right?
Of course not. When the judge saw through his friendship excuse, James changed his tune. He started blaming the media for sensationalizing the story and portraying him as a sexual predator.
Which, let's be honest,
Yeah.
the evidence pretty clearly suggests he was...
Right. It's another common tactic used by abusers to discredit their victims and avoid consequences. It's a way to deflect attention from their own actions and create a narrative where they are the ones being unfairly targeted and victimized.
Shifting the blame, huh?
Exactly.
It's incredible how they try to twist things.
It's all about maintaining control and avoiding responsibility.
So what else did James try?
Well, then he tried to use his supposed sex addiction as a mitigating factor, claiming he had been diagnosed with compulsive sexual behavior.
A sex addiction?
Yeah.
But surely the judge didn't fall for that either.
No, the judge wasn't having any of it. Attributing criminal behavior to a sex addiction is a dangerous and often misleading argument. While compulsive sexual behavior is a recognized condition, it doesn't excuse or justify acts of violence or exploitation. It's crucial to hold individuals accountable for their actions, regardless of any underlying mental health conditions they may have.
So the judge held his ground. That's good to hear.
The judge saw right through James's attempts to deflect blame and minimize his crimes. He pointed out the premeditation, the cruelty involved, and the fact that James had a history of infidelity himself, which completely undermined his claims of outrage over his wife's alleged affairs.
Oh, the hypocrisy.
Right. The judge's recognition of James's manipulative tactics was crucial in ensuring that justice was served.
And what about Jennifer? Did she get a chance to speak?
Yes, in her victim impact statement, Jennifer spoke of the profound hurt, the betrayal, and the trauma she had endured. She revealed the dark thoughts and suicidal ideations she'd struggled with as a result of her husband's actions.
I can't even imagine the pain she must have been going through.
It's heartbreaking. Her words were a powerful testament to the devastating and long-lasting effects of sexual violence. It was a reminder that behind the headlines and the legal proceedings, there are real people whose lives have been irrevocably changed by these acts of cruelty and betrayal.
Absolutely.
The impact on the victims goes far beyond the courtroom.
Yeah, trauma like that. It stays with you.
They may experience a range of emotions: shock, anger, fear, guilt, shame. They may struggle with flashbacks, nightmares, and have difficulty trusting others. The road to recovery is often long and arduous, requiring significant emotional and psychological support.
And it's even more concerning, considering the stigma and shame that often surrounds sexual violence, particularly within families and communities.
That's a major barrier.
It makes it so difficult for victims to come forward and seek help.
You're right. The societal response to sexual violence is often inadequate and even harmful. Victim blaming, disbelief, and a reluctance to acknowledge the prevalence of these crimes can create a culture of silence that protects perpetrators and leaves victims feeling isolated and unsupported.
And this case just perfectly illustrates that point. Even when faced with overwhelming evidence, these men tried to shift blame, minimize their actions, and portray themselves as victims.
It's a classic example of how abusers manipulate and gaslight their victims, compounding the trauma and making it even harder for them to heal and move forward.
It's just enraging.
It is.
This case, while specific to Singapore, has really sparked conversations worldwide about betrayal, the complexities of relationships, and the importance of consent.
It reminds us that these issues are not confined to any one culture or location. It's a global problem.
So what are some key takeaways that we can all reflect on from this deeply disturbing case?
Well, I think it's a stark reminder that things aren't always what they seem. People we trust can betray us in unimaginable ways, and the veneer of normalcy can hide a dark undercurrent of abuse and manipulation.
I think that's a really important point.
It is.
It's also a powerful lesson about the importance of listening to our intuition.
Absolutely.
If something feels off, if we have a gut feeling that something's not right, we need to trust ourselves and seek help.
We often downplay our instincts, but they can be incredibly valuable in protecting ourselves and others from harm.
It's like that saying, trust your gut. And perhaps most importantly, this case really highlights the critical importance of consent. Consent is not just a legal requirement. It's the foundation of any healthy and respectful relationship.
Well said.
It's about ensuring that all parties involved are freely and enthusiastically participating, without coercion or manipulation.
Consent is paramount. It's not just about sex. It's about respecting each other's boundaries, autonomy, and agency in all aspects of a relationship.
So this deep dive has been heavy, but incredibly important. It's forced us to confront uncomfortable realities and ask difficult questions.
And those questions don't have easy answers. But by having these conversations, by raising awareness, and by challenging harmful norms, we can start to create a world where these kinds of stories become less and less common.
I think that's a great message to end on.
It is.
We need to keep talking about these issues, even when they're uncomfortable.
Absolutely.
Because that's how we create change.
We got it.
So before we move on to part 2 of this deep dive, let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. Okay, so we left off talking about Sammy Boy, the online forum that played such a central role in this whole horrifying story. And I guess the question that keeps coming up for me is, what could have been done to prevent this platform from being used to facilitate such horrific crimes?
Yeah, that's a really tough question. It's like this ongoing debate, right, about the responsibility of online platforms
Yeah.
in terms of moderating content and preventing harm.
Right, because on one hand,
Yeah.
we have freedom of speech and the right to privacy online.
Exactly.
But on the other hand, we have a responsibility to protect people from being hurt
Right.
and to stop the spread of illegal content.
It's a tricky balance to strike.
For sure.
I mean, where do we draw the line? It's not always clear cut.
And in this case, it seems like Sammy Boy, especially the Asian Values Forum, with its total lack of moderation and tolerance for explicit content, created this breeding ground for these men to connect, share their twisted fantasies, and normalize their criminal behavior.
Yeah. It's definitely a case that raises some serious red flags about the potential dangers of unmoderated online spaces.
So what can be done? What are some concrete steps that platforms like Sammy Boy could take to prevent something like this from happening again?
Well, I think it starts with acknowledging that freedom of speech, while a fundamental right, doesn't give anyone a free pass to incite violence or engage in illegal activities online.
Right, there have to be some limits.
Absolutely. And while it's important to protect freedom of expression, it's equally crucial to create a safe and ethical online environment. Finding that balance is a challenge.
For sure.
But it requires ongoing dialogue and collaboration between policymakers, platform providers, and users.
It's like a shared responsibility.
Exactly.
So what would that look like in practice?
Well, for starters, platform providers need to take a much more proactive approach to monitoring content.
Okay, so not just waiting for users to report things.
Right. They need to be more vigilant
Okay.
about identifying and removing harmful content before it spreads.
And what about reporting mechanisms?
Those need to be robust and easy to use so that users feel comfortable reporting suspicious activity.
So making it simple and accessible.
Exactly. And of course, platforms need to work closely with law enforcement to address criminal activity that's happening on their sites.
So it's a multi-pronged approach.
It is.
It's not just one thing.
It's about taking responsibility and taking action.
But it's also about individual users
Yeah,
doing their part, right?
absolutely. We can't just rely on platform providers to police everything.
So what can users do?
Well, for one,
Hmm.
we need to be more critical consumers of information online.
Okay, so like not just blindly accepting everything we read.
Right, we need to question things,
Yeah.
check sources, and be wary of content that seems too extreme or sensationalized.
Especially in these unmoderated forums where anyone can say anything.
But what about reporting?
Users need to report any suspicious activity they see. Don't just scroll past it. Take a moment to report it so that the platform can investigate.
So even if we're not sure,
Better safe than sorry.
it's about being proactive. Exactly.
So this case really highlights the importance of being aware of the potential dangers online.
Absolutely. The internet can be a powerful tool for connection and communication, but it also has a dark side.
And we need to be aware of that dark side.
We do.
So we can protect ourselves and others.
You gotta.
Now, shifting gears a bit, I want to come back to the victims in this case, the wives. What kind of support exists for them in Singapore? How do they even begin to heal after such a horrific betrayal of trust?
That's such a crucial question, and unfortunately, one that doesn't always have easy answers. While the legal system focuses on punishment, the victims are often left to deal with the emotional and psychological fallout of these crimes.
Right, the trauma
The trauma,
and the healing process.
and sadly, support systems for victims of sexual violence can vary greatly depending on cultural attitudes and available resources.
I imagine that in a society like Singapore, which is known for its strict social norms and emphasis on order and control, it might be even more challenging for women to speak out against abuse.
You're absolutely right. Cultural factors definitely play a role in how victims of abuse are perceived and supported. In some cultures, there's a huge stigma associated with speaking out against one's family, especially one's husband.
It's like a double betrayal.
It is.
You're betrayed by your husband, and then you're potentially ostracized by your community for speaking out against him.
Exactly.
And that can make it incredibly difficult for victims to come forward and seek help.
It's a huge barrier.
And even beyond cultural factors, there's the universal challenge of providing adequate mental health services. Trauma therapy is specialized,
It is.
and unfortunately, it's not always readily available, even in countries with robust healthcare systems.
Access to qualified therapists can be limited. especially for those who face financial barriers
Right.
or live in rural areas.
It's a complex issue.
It really is.
So, as we try to wrap our heads around all of this, I think it's important to acknowledge how deeply disturbing this case is. It's shaken me, and I'm sure it's shaken our listeners as well. So, as we move towards the end of our deep dive, what are some key takeaways we can all reflect on?
I think this case serves as a stark reminder that things are not always as they appear. People we trust can betray us in unimaginable ways. And what seems normal on the surface can actually hide a dark undercurrent of abuse and manipulation.
It's a reminder to trust our gut. If something feels off, if we have a feeling that something's not right, we need to listen to that inner voice and seek help.
Absolutely. Our instincts are often trying to tell us something.
And we need to pay attention.
We do.
And above all, this case underscores the paramount importance of consent. Consent is not just a legal requirement, it's the foundation of any healthy and respectful relationship.
Well said.
It's about ensuring that everyone involved is freely and enthusiastically participating without any coercion or manipulation.
Consent is about respect.
It's about agency.
It's about autonomy.
It's about basic human dignity.
Exactly.
This deep dive has been heavy, but it's been crucial. It's forced us to confront some really uncomfortable realities and ask some really tough questions.
And those questions don't have easy answers. But by having these conversations, by raising awareness, and by challenging harmful norms, we can start to create a world where these kinds of stories become less and less common.
And that's what we need to strive for.
We do.
A world where everyone feels safe
Yeah.
and respected,
Yeah.
and where consent is truly understood and valued.
I couldn't agree more.
So thank you for joining us on this deep dive. It's been a tough one, but it's been important.
It has.
And we hope it's encouraged you to think critically about these issues, to be more aware of the warning signs, and to speak out against injustice wherever you see it.
Because we all have a role to play.
We do, in creating a safer and more just world.
Absolutely.
So, until next time, stay curious.
And stay informed.
We'll see you on our next deep dive. This case really makes you think about the wider impact, beyond these specific individuals. What kind of lasting effects does something like this have on society as a whole?
That's a great question. I think cases like this can definitely act as a catalyst for broader conversations about things like gender roles, power dynamics in relationships, and the need for better protection and support for victims of abuse.
It's like it forces us to look in the mirror as a society and confront some uncomfortable truths.
Exactly. It challenges traditional notions of masculinity and femininity and makes us really examine the prevalence of violence against women.
Because this isn't just a Singapore problem.
Right. It's a global issue.
It's a reminder that violence against women happens everywhere.
It's a global epidemic, and it demands a global effort to address it.
So what can we do? How do we even begin to tackle such a widespread problem?
It starts with changing attitudes, challenging harmful beliefs, and promoting a culture of respect and equality.
It's a tall order.
It is, but it's essential.
So where do we start?
Well, we need education, we need awareness campaigns, we need legal reforms to ensure that victims are protected and perpetrators are held accountable.
It's about creating a system that supports victims.
And holds abusers responsible for their actions.
And it's about changing the way we think about these issues.
Exactly. It's about shifting cultural norms and challenging those deep-seated beliefs that perpetuate violence and inequality.
It's a long road ahead.
It is. But it's a journey we need to take.
And I think this case, as horrific as it is, can serve as a wake-up call.
I agree.
It's a reminder that we can't afford to be complacent.
We need to be vigilant, we need to speak out against injustice, and we need to support survivors.
Because silence only protects abusers.
It does.
And speaking out is the first step towards creating real change.
Exactly.
So as we conclude this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with a few final thoughts. First and foremost, if you or someone you know is experiencing abuse, please reach out for help. There are resources available, and you don't have to go through this alone.
There are people who care, and there is support available.
And remember, it's not your fault.
You are not to blame.
Abuse is never the victim's fault.
Ever.
Secondly, let's all commit to being more aware of the signs of abuse, more aware of the ways in which our words and actions can contribute to a culture of violence, and more aware of the need to challenge harmful norms and stereotypes.
We need to be upstanders.
Not bystanders.
We need to speak up
and speak out
against injustice.
wherever we see it.
It's our collective responsibility.
And finally, let's remember the incredible resilience of the human spirit.
The strength of survivors,
the power of hope,
and the possibility of healing.
even in the face of unimaginable trauma.
This case is a testament to that.
It's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there is always light.
Always.
So thank you for joining us on this difficult but necessary deep dive. We hope it sparked some important conversations and inspired you to take action. Until next time, stay safe, stay informed, and stay engaged. Because together, we can make a difference.
We can lighten direct